Hello all my Kenvians, PapaKenn here, and welcome to episode 107 of Discovering Doctor Who. The episode I'm going to be talking about today is obviously the finale for Series 9, Hellbent. And this... well, if you watched my reaction video, you know my initial feelings on the episode. Especially if you caught the final words. And the episode itself is definitely one that has sparked up some controversy, to say the least. Or maybe not so much controversy, but people definitely seem to be in two camps for the most part. They either really like it, or they really don't, for a number of reasons. And I thought I was in one camp. But now, I at least partially find myself in the other. This is another one of those cases, as I am famous for, in which I don't entirely know where I stand as far as my overall opinion of this episode goes. So, a few things to keep in mind. Although I will technically overall be going with a similar structure as before, the format of this video is definitely going to be a bit different. Like, I'm going to list off, my favorite parts, and then my annoyances. And the annoyances that I'm going to list are definitely the most significant issues that I have with this episode. But at the same time, I'm also, once I name those issues, I'm going to go into defense for why at least one of those isn't entirely true. Or at least not for me, from my perspective, it's not entirely true. But like I said, it's going to be an interesting one. So, starting off with my first favorite part of this episode. Actually, you know what? I had a few listed here, and they were some minor things, like the general character regenerating into a woman. I thought that was really cool. The people of Gallifrey, the non-Time Lords, just the regular citizens of Gallifrey, came around the Doctor, and other things like that I really like. But I'm going to go with one particular favorite part of this episode, and that is that in the end, we basically got a reversal of the situation with Donna. In that, or as I wrote down, the memory tables were turned. Could have written that better, but oh well. But especially given the beginning of the episode, where it seems like, obviously, like you're thinking, obviously the Doctor knows who she is, but she doesn't recognize him. And then obviously we find out the truth later that it was in fact the Doctor who got his memory erased. Apparently, all of his memories of Clara. If I remember correctly, there were apparently some details, like some very minor details that are left in, but he doesn't remember who she is. Well, because obviously he sees her right in front of him, and he doesn't recognize her. And I liked the way that was done in this story. Now, moving on from there, well, before I move on, obviously, if you have any of your own particular favorites you want to list from this episode, please do in the comments down below. Now, as for my negatives, if you have anything to say about them, please wait until I've finished talking about them, both the positive and the negatives, or rather, both the negative and the positives, if I have any positive spin to those. Wait until I'm done with those before leaving that comment down below. But let's start with my first annoyance with the episode. And this is the one that really just mostly bothers me. And it's that at the end of Heaven Sent, we see Gallifrey again. And at the end, it brought me back to the day of the Doctor, when the Doctor found out that Gallifrey is still out there somewhere, and he was so happy. He was so elated. And then we come to this episode, and while we do spend time on Gallifrey, we do get to see some of the characters, I feel like Gallifrey was just sort of pushed aside. in the greater scheme of things. Like, I expected when we saw Gallifrey again, like when we went, well, it was my first time like seeing the show actually on Gallifrey that I can recall, but I expected that when the Doctor returned, that there was going to be more to it. And it seemed like it was building up to a point where there was going to be more to it, like maybe the Doctor was going to spend an extended period of time on Gallifrey, and maybe come the next series, an episode or two might be spent on that. But that's obviously not the direction it went, and when all was said and done, Gallifrey was just kinda left there hanging. Now, I assume the Doctor knows where it is now, knows how to get back to it. But at the same time, again, I just felt like, especially after the big reveal at the end of Heaven Sent, that we were going to get to experience more of Gallifrey. We're gonna get to see more, and we did to a degree. But just overall, the lack of experience within Gallifrey just really disappointed me in the end. So yeah, that's my first annoyance. Now my second annoyance, and this is definitely the one that I struggle the most with. But it is, I would say, probably the annoyance voiced most, next to Gallifrey, voiced most by people that don't like it, and it's an issue I also have upon reflection of the episode. And it's that the events of this finale reduce the impact from the previous two episodes. And the reason why I struggle with this is that, on one hand, that statement is true. What happens at the end of Face the Raven and what the events taking place during Heaven Sent are definitely driven and just made all the more powerful by Clara's death. So, in this episode, when Clara is essentially brought back from the dead, or removed from the point in time at which she died, that does take away that sting, because, like, for those of us that liked Clara, or at the very least, if you enjoyed the character of Clara, or Jenna Coleman's portrayal of the character, there was that sting left. There was that moment of just pure sadness when Clara dies from the Raven at the end of Face the Raven. There's knowing the rage in the Doctor's voice, knowing the rage he feels toward the people responsible for killing Clara in Heaven Sent. But then in Hellbent, she's brought back from the dead. Cats. And it does admittedly remove some of that impact. Like, you can't ever watch those episodes and have that same feeling again. Now, that would be true regardless. But now, upon rewatch, if I watch and the scene where Clara dies and the Doctor's words about saying if you had anything to do with her death, I can't remember his exact phrase from Heaven Sent, but yeah, it's definitely hard to have, you can't have the same impact anymore. It's like your experience after knowing what has happened is just completely different from now on. I probably won't be able to watch those the same again. I will definitely still feel sad when Clara dies, when and if I watch that scene again, but knowing what happens, it takes away from that impact. It takes away the full impact, which, repeating myself, would happen anyway because I would still be re-experiencing the episode, not necessarily just experiencing it for the first time. I think I kind of jumbled my words there, but there you go. Now, while, again, this is true, at the same time, I feel like it didn't take away from the overall impact of those two episodes. Because, in my eyes, the Doctor never really despite the fact that she is technically alive again now. Although she has no pulse, she's essentially immortal, like a shielder now. But despite the fact that the Doctor was able to kind of reverse what happened, he was able to take Clara away from that death before it happened, like, or rather the very second it happened, when her heart stopped. Again, because she doesn't have a pulse. There might be some pauses here while I try to gather my thoughts. I apologize. But even though those events no longer fully have their same impact, the impact they had on the character of the Doctor remain the same. Up to that point where obviously he loses his memory, everything that happened is because of Clara's death. His rage, his anger toward a shielder, and then obviously the Time Lords, primarily the President, is because he lost his friend. The motivation he has to keep on going, other than just self-preservation, the desire to get out, to escape from that torture, to escape from his own personal hell. Part of that motivation is Clara. And we don't know that part of that motivation is to try and take her from that moment of death so that she can be saved. We don't know that until this episode. So if you take it from a personal perspective, put yourself in the Doctor's shoes. This is someone who you've grown incredibly close with. This is someone that has grown so close to you that they have begun to act very much like you do. Now, whether or not you like that about the character, it doesn't matter, but take it from the Doctor's perspective. This is someone that he cares about so much. Sorry for the background noise. This is someone he cares about so much. He's cared about all of his companions. He cares about them all. But this is the person that, this is the first and only companion that his new set of regenerations, that's the first companion he's had. It's the first person that he came to really be able to be comfortable with. And if you think back to Series 8, I mean, that's the truth. The Doctor in Series 8 was very grumpy, very grumpy. He didn't like hardly anyone, but he always liked Clara. They didn't always see eye to eye and they fought. But often the people we care about most are the ones that we'll fight with because we're trying to protect them from something. And it's like the Doctor has said, I think even in Series 8 and in Series 9, but he has a duty, what was it, a duty of protection? Or something along those lines. And I don't know, I almost, the way I see their relationship in the end is like an uncle and a niece. Let's think of it that way. Or maybe even a grandpa and a granddaughter. And in both cases, this is one of those situations where the grandchild or the niece has become so attached to this older person that they love, that they've begun to act like that person. They've begun to emulate certain things they do, which obviously resulted in Clara's death. And I look at it from that perspective. Now, I don't have any grandkids, obviously, but I have my nieces, and just the idea, my nieces or nephews, or any of the children in my life, if one of them, regardless of whether they started to act like me, but, you know, if you have that bond, that familial love, and you lose that person, but you know there's a way you can save them. If there's the slightest chance that you could go back and save that person, if there's the slightest chance you could keep that person that you treasure, that you love so very much, from dying. I can't think of a single parent, a single grandparent, a single aunt, a single uncle, anyone, a brother, a sister, I can't think of anyone that wouldn't do whatever they could, would break any rules they could to save that person. No matter what the sacrifice, because let's face it, when emotions get pulled into a situation like that, logic often goes out the window. And so yeah, while I do agree that on one hand, Clara being technically alive again does somewhat take away from the overall impact of her death and then Heaven Sent. At the same time, I feel like it didn't change it at all. Because again, I put myself in the try to put myself in the doctor's mindset, try to put myself in the doctor's shoes of wanting to save this person that you care about so much. Now, obviously that brings up a lot of questions like why couldn't he do something like that for Amy Pond, well, the Ponds in general, some of the other companions from the past, and those are legitimate questions, but within the context of this story, of these 3 episodes in particular, it works for me. It honestly does. Now, I know I may have rambled a lot here, I may not have made a lot of sense, but those are my, in the end, that has to be my overall thoughts for this episode. That and Ashildr didn't really serve a purpose in the episode overall. Other than potentially one, in that regards a spin-off, but that's something I'm going to comment on in the Series 9 wrap-up, which will probably come after the review of the Christmas episode. So yes. Alright. So, I do have one last thing to talk about, but before I mention that, as always, if you have any of your own favorite parts of this episode, your own annoyances, please comment on them down below. If you have anything to say about my rambling thoughts just now, let me know what those are. But please do keep in mind, this is all my opinion. And what you have to say is also all your opinions, so don't get in fights over who's right and who's wrong. Because when it comes to opinions, there really is no right and wrong, especially when it comes to a work of fiction like this. But then again, there's exceptions to that. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Alright, moving on from there. The last thing that I do have is a quote of the episode. And it's basically a conversation between Clara and the Doctor near the beginning where he's playing the guitar and we think she doesn't know who he is when it's actually the opposite the whole time. But the quote of the episode for me is this. He's playing a song which is essentially Clara's song. And Clara asks this: "Is it a sad song?" The Doctor says, "Nothing's sad till it's over. Then everything is." And just the impact of that line right there on me. Just thinking about that line in general. And especially taking it outside the context of just this episode. I mean, that's a line that can apply to so many aspects of this show that I've experienced so far. When it's over for the different doctors, when Eccleston left, when Tennant left, when Smith left, when the different companions have left. It's just the sadness that impacts you as a fan, if you really enjoy that character, is so intense. And then you take it outside of the show to your own personal life, and it's a line that still speaks true. So yeah, that's the quote of the episode for me. If you have another line of your own that you would like to mention, please do mention it down below. And I'm sorry for the strange format of today's episode, or today's review. It was just, this was an episode that was really hard for me to just go with the regular format on. especially when there was one major thing that was a negative for many people, and to a degree myself as well, when at the same time I also see the other side of the coin. So, yeah, that's why I went with this format. May not have liked it, but it probably won't be a format that pops up very often. But alright everyone, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Doctor Who. I will see you all next time for the review of the Christmas special, The Husbands of River Song. And yes, I'm doing that before the Series 9 wrap-up because although I guess the Christmas specials are separate from the previous series, they fall in the same year, so it works for me. So I know that's not how that people like to be technical about it, but that's just the way it works for me. So there you go. Alright, so once again, I will see you all next time for the next Discovering Doctor Who for The Husbands of River Song. And until then, everyone, have a great, great week. And please, oh please, be civil in the comments. Alright, everyone, Alonzi!